The clay tablets discovered in the temple library of Ashurbanipal at Nineveh between 1849 and 1855 contain what may be the most sophisticated dream interpretation system ever developed in the ancient world. Among the thousands of cuneiform texts catalogued by Austen Henry Layard and his successors, a remarkable series of tablets designated the Zakik Dream Book presents not merely superstitious folklore, but a systematic methodology for decoding symbolic communications that the Mesopotamians believed originated from divine sources. These tablets, dating to approximately 700 BC, but clearly based on much earlier Sumerian sources, describe dream interpretation as a precise science requiring years of training, astronomical knowledge, and understanding of complex symbolic systems that connected celestial phenomena with human consciousness. The most complete version of this dream interpretation manual, preserved on tablet K3952 in the British Museum collection, contains over 3,000 dream scenarios with corresponding interpretations, organised according to sophisticated classification systems. The text distinguishes between different categories of dreams based on the dreamer's ritual purity, the phase of the moon during which the dream occurred, and the presence of specific celestial configurations. This level of systematic organisation suggests the Mesopotamians understood dreaming not as random mental activity, but as a structured communication channel requiring proper decoding procedures to extract meaningful information. What makes these dream interpretation texts particularly significant is their integration with omen literature that treated celestial observations, animal behaviour, and physical phenomena as interconnected components of a comprehensive divination system. The Enuma Anu Enlil, a massive compilation of astronomical omens spanning 70 tablets, demonstrates that Mesopotamian scholars maintained detailed records correlating dream content with planetary positions, lunar phases, and stellar configurations across centuries of observations. This systematic approach to identifying patterns between subjective dream experiences and objective astronomical events reveals a level of empirical rigour that challenges conventional assumptions about ancient superstition versus scientific methodology. The underground chambers discovered beneath the Gula Temple at Isin during excavations conducted by the Oriental Institute of Chicago between 1973 and 1975 reveal architectural features specifically designed to facilitate what Sumerian texts call dream descent rituals. These chambers, carved into bedrock approximately 15 meters below the temple foundation, incorporate acoustic properties, ventilation systems, and geometric proportions that created controlled sensory environments for inducing specific types of dream states. The lead archaeologist, Barthel Rauder, documented 7 distinct chambers arranged in a precise geometric pattern that corresponds exactly to the constellation configuration described in astronomical texts as the 7 judges of the underworld. Each chamber measures precisely 3.6 meters in length by 2.4 meters in width, with ceiling heights of 2.1 meters, creating proportions that match the golden ratio to within millimeter tolerances. The walls consist of fired brick covered with a specialized plaster mixture that chemical analysis reveals contained finely ground limestone, gypsum, and trace amounts of copper compounds that would have created reflective surfaces in lamplight. The acoustic properties of these chambers demonstrate sophisticated understanding of sound manipulation principles. Tests conducted by architectural acoustics specialist Thomas Verl in 1977 revealed that the chambers amplify sounds in the frequency range between 60 and 90 Hz, while dampening higher frequencies. This selective amplification creates an environment where low, rumbling sounds resonate powerfully, while normal conversation becomes muffled and distant. Cuneiform texts describing dream incubation procedures specifically mention the importance of deep humming tones produced by temple musicians during the preparatory rituals, suggesting that the acoustic design was intentional rather than coincidental. The ventilation systems incorporated into these chambers reveal even more sophisticated engineering. Each chamber connects to a network of narrow shafts carved through the bedrock that create constant air circulation without producing noticeable drafts. The shaft configurations ensure that fresh air enters near the floor, while stale air exits through ceiling vents, maintaining optimal oxygen levels for extended periods of occupation. Temperature measurements taken throughout the annual cycle show that the chambers maintain remarkably stable conditions, varying less than 3 degrees Celsius between summer and winter, creating an environment isolated from normal seasonal fluctuations. The entrance to each chamber incorporates a stepped descent, requiring dreamers to navigate 7 descending levels before reaching the incubation space. Cuneiform ritual texts describe this descent as symbolically representing the journey through the 7 gates of the underworld, with specific prayers and offerings required at each level. The physical act of descending through progressive darkness while reciting ritual formulas would have created a powerful psychological preparation for the dream experience, separating the practitioner from normal waking consciousness through both physical and mental means. Archaeological evidence from the chambers includes the remains of elaborate sleeping platforms constructed from cedar wood and covered with woven textiles. Analysis of textile fragments reveals the use of specific plant fibers treated with aromatic resins that would have released fragrance when warmed by body heat. Stone headrests discovered in several chambers show wear patterns indicating extensive use over long periods. These headrests incorporate carved channels that directed sound vibrations toward the dreamer's head, suggesting they functioned as acoustic focusing devices that enhanced the environmental sound effects. The walls of several chambers preserve painted imagery that provides visual stimulation for dream incubation. The iconography includes stylized representations of divine figures, celestial symbols, and geometric patterns that correspond to symbolic systems described in dream interpretation manuals. Pigment analysis reveals the use of mineral compounds, including azurite, malachite, and ochre, mixed with organic binders that created colours remaining vivid in the controlled underground environment. The placement of these images at specific positions relative to the sleeping platform suggests they were positioned to be the last visual input before sleep and the first sight upon waking. Administrative tablets from the city of Ur, dating to approximately 2100 BC, document the existence of a professional class of dream interpreters called Shabru, who underwent decades of training in temple schools before receiving certification to practice their craft. These specialists maintained detailed case records, earned substantial fees for their services, and held positions of considerable influence within royal courts and temple hierarchies. The training curriculum for dream interpreters, preserved in educational tablets from the scribal school at Nippur, required students to memorize extensive compendiums of dream symbolism spanning thousands of individual scenarios. Tablet Ni 4328 describes a 7-year foundational program covering linguistic analysis, astronomical observation, ritual procedures, and symbolic interpretation before students could begin practical training under master interpreters. The text indicates that only students demonstrating exceptional memory capabilities and intuitive symbolic understanding were selected for this specialized track within the broader scribal education system. The professional certification process involved public demonstration of interpretive skills before a panel of senior practitioners who evaluated both technical knowledge and practical ability. Administrative records from Ur describe examination procedures where candidates received previously unknown dream reports and had to provide interpretations that were then compared against documented outcomes from the original dreams. The pass rate for these examinations appears to have been quite low, with texts mentioning that only 1 in 5 candidates achieved certification on their first attempt. Economic documents from multiple cities provide detailed information about the fees charged by professional dream interpreters. A contract from Lhasa dated to the reign of Rimsin specifies payment of 2 shekels of silver for interpretation of a single dream, with additional fees for follow-up consultations and ritual recommendations. when compared to contemporary wage data showing that skilled labourers earned approximately 1 shekel per month. These interpretation fees represented substantial sums accessible only to wealthy merchants, temple officials, and members of the royal family. The social status of dream interpreters reflected their economic success and their perceived value as advisors. Royal correspondence from the Mari archives includes letters from King Zimri Lim consulting with interpreters named Ibalpiel and Ibal Adad regarding troubling dreams experienced by members of the court. These letters demonstrate that interpreters had direct access to royal audiences and that their opinions carried weight in political decision-making processes. The deferential language used when addressing these specialists indicates they commanded respect, comparable to high-ranking priests and military commanders. Dream interpreters maintained detailed professional archives containing case histories of previous interpretations and their outcomes. Tablet catalogues from temple libraries at Babylon and Sippar list collections of dream records organized by symbolic category, dreamer status, and astronomical timing. These archives served multiple functions, including reference material for difficult cases, training resources for students, and empirical databases for identifying correlation patterns between dream elements and subsequent events. The systematic record-keeping suggests that dream interpretation was treated as an evidence-based practice rather than purely intuitive activity. The professional ethics of dream interpretation receive explicit discussion in wisdom literature that establishes standards for practitioner conduct. Text, Veit 9555 from the Berlin collection, describes the responsibilities of interpreters to maintain client confidentiality, provide honest assessments even when interpretations predict negative outcomes, and refuse cases where conflicts of interest might compromise objectivity. The existence of such ethical guidelines indicates that dream interpretation functioned as a regulated profession with established standards of practice. Succession within the interpretive profession often followed family lineages with knowledge and case archives passing from master to apprentice across generations. Administrative tablets identify several prominent interpreting families in major cities who maintained their positions over multiple centuries. The Urutu family of Sippar, documented across 7 generations spanning approximately 170 years, exemplifies this pattern of hereditary professional specialization. Such continuity enabled the accumulation of extensive empirical knowledge and the refinement of interpretive techniques through successive practitioners building upon their predecessors' experience. Babylonian astronomical texts from the Seleucid period preserve detailed calculations correlating specific dream types with planetary positions and lunar phases. Tablet BM 45,789 describes how dreams occurring during particular astronomical configurations carried enhanced prophetic significance, requiring interpreters to maintain continuous observation of celestial phenomena to properly contextualize dream reports. The mathematical sophistication of these astronomical correlations exceeds what might be expected from superstitious belief systems. The tablet contains tables calculating the synodic periods of all 5 visible planets, with accuracy matching modern astronomical values to within fractions of a day. Venus cycles are tracked through a complete 8-year pattern of appearances and disappearances with specific dream significance assigned to dreams occurring during each phase of the cycle. The precision required for these calculations demonstrates that temple astronomers maintained continuous observation records spanning multiple centuries to establish reliable planetary period measurements. Lunar phase correlations receive even more detailed treatment, with dream interpretation manuals dividing the lunar month into specific periods associated with different types of prophetic content. Dreams occurring during the 3 days preceding the new moon were considered particularly significant for receiving messages from underworld deities, while those during the full moon period connected with celestial divinities. The waxing and waning phases each carried distinct interpretive frameworks with identical dream symbols receiving different meanings depending on lunar timing. This lunar periodization required interpreters to maintain accurate calendar systems and to know the precise lunar phase when consulting about any reported dream. The integration of planetary and lunar factors created complex matrices for dream interpretation that varied according to multiple astronomical variables. A dream of water during Venus morning star phase occurring at new moon would receive different interpretation than the same dream during Venus evening star phase at full moon. Tablet K6174 from Nineveh preserves a comprehensive reference. System cross-indexing dream symbols with 12 planetary positions and 8 lunar phases, creating 96 distinct interpretive contexts for each dream element. The systematic organization of this material suggests it served as a practical working tool for professional interpreters rather than theoretical speculation. Solar eclipses and planetary conjunctions received special attention as astronomical events that dramatically enhance the prophetic significance of concurrent dreams. Temple. Observation logs from Babylon document procedures for immediately collecting dream reports from temple personnel following eclipse events. The unusual dreams reported during these periods were subjected to intensive analysis by senior interpreters, and the results were preserved in special archives. Statistical analysis of these eclipse dream collections reveals that interpreters identified certain recurring symbolic patterns, appearing preferentially during eclipse periods, suggesting they recognized correlations that transcended random chance. The astronomical timing requirements created practical challenges for dream interpretation, since dreamers often could not precisely specify when their dreams occurred during the sleep period. Temple protocols addressed this issue by recommending that individuals seeking prophetic dreams spend the night in temple incubation chambers, where attendants mark the hours and observe celestial positions throughout the night. Upon waking, dreamers could consult with the attendants to determine the astronomical configuration present when their dreams most likely occurred based on their position within the sleep cycle. Professional interpreters needed extensive astronomical training to properly apply these timing correlations. Educational texts from the Scribal School at Uruk include astronomical observation exercises requiring students to identify planetary positions, calculate lunar phases, and predict upcoming celestial events. The curriculum integrated practical sky observation with mathematical calculation, demonstrating that dream interpretation required genuine scientific knowledge rather than purely symbolic manipulation. The preservation of these astronomical correlation systems through the Seleucid period, over 1,000 years after the creation of the original Sumerian dream interpretation traditions, demonstrates the durability of institutional knowledge transmission. The consistency of astronomical principles across this temporal span, despite multiple political transitions and cultural changes, indicates that temple schools successfully maintained educational continuity, preserving sophisticated technical knowledge through systematic training programs. Chemical analysis of residues found in dream incubation chambers at multiple Mesopotamian sites reveals the use of complex aromatic compounds, including frankincense, myrrh, cedar oil, and substances containing psychoactive alkaloids. Temple texts describe precise recipes for dream incense that required specific proportions, careful preparation procedures, and astronomical timing for optimal effectiveness. The incense residues analysed by archaeochemist Erica Bleibtreu from samples collected at Babylon Uruk and NASA show remarkably consistent compositions across different sites and time periods. Gas chromatography mass spectrometry analysis identified over 30 distinct organic compounds in the residue mixtures, with the primary components being boswellic acids from frankincense resin, comophoric acids from myrrh, and cedral from cedarwood. The proportions of these three base materials remained nearly constant at approximately 40% frankincense, 30% myrrh, and 20% cedar, with the remaining 10% comprising various additives that varied somewhat between different sites. The psychoactive additives identified in some samples raise intriguing questions about the mechanisms underlying prophetic dream experiences. Trace analysis detected alkaloid compounds consistent with Syrian rue seeds, which contain harmine and harmaline, substances known to produce altered consciousness states and vivid visual experiences. The concentrations found in the residues were substantial enough to produce measurable physiological effects when burned and inhaled in enclosed spaces. Cuneiform pharmaceutical texts describe Syrian rue as a sacred plant associated with divine communication and prescribe its use in specific ritual contexts, including dream incubation ceremonies. Temple recipes for dream incense preserved in ritual manuals specify elaborate preparation procedures that required multiple processing steps extending over several days. Tablet K 2456 from the Nineveh Library describes the production process for what it terms the incense of true dreams, beginning with the selection of frankincense tears collected during the waning moon period. The resin had to be ground together with myrrh using a stone mortar while reciting specific incantations, then mixed with cedar oil that had been extracted through a distillation process involving heated copper vessels. The mixture required aging in sealed clay containers for 7 days before being combined with the powdered additives, including the Syrian rue component. The astronomical timing requirements for incense preparation mirror those for dream interpretation, with different recipes specified for different celestial configurations. An incense formula intended for receiving solar deity communications required preparation during daytime hours when specific planets were visible, while lunar deity incense had to be compounded during nighttime with the moon above the horizon. The precision of these timing requirements indicates that incense production represented a specialized temple activity, requiring astronomical knowledge and careful planning, rather than a routine manufacturing process. The quantities of incense consumed during dream incubation rituals were substantial, based on residue accumulations and consumption records. Administrative tablets from the Gula temple at Isin document monthly incense allocations of 12 minas, approximately 6 kilograms, for the dream chamber operations. Given that individual incubation sessions probably consume between 50 and 100 grams of incense material, these quantities would support approximately 60 to 120 dream sessions per month, suggesting regular intensive use of the facilities. The economic value of dream incense materials made them significant commodities in ancient trade networks. Frankincense and myrrh both originated from southern Arabia and the Horn of Africa, requiring long-distance trade routes to supply Mesopotamian temples. Price lists from Ear indicate that frankincense cost approximately 3 shekels of silver per mina, making the monthly incense allocation for a single dream chamber worth roughly 36 shekels, or the equivalent of 3 years' wages for a common labourer. The willingness to invest such resources in dream incubation activities demonstrates the high value placed on prophetic dream experiences. Modern experimental archaeology has attempted to replicate ancient dream incense formulas based on the chemical analysis and textual recipes. Researchers at the University of Heidelberg produced incense mixtures matching the analysed compositions and burned them in reconstructed chamber environments, while monitoring air quality and conducting subjective experience reports from participants. The results indicated that the incense produced measurably altered states of consciousness, characterized by enhanced visual imagery, temporal distortion, and increased dream recall. While these experiments cannot definitively prove that ancient practitioners experienced specific prophetic visions, they demonstrate that the incense formulas were capable of producing neurological effects that would enhance certain aspects of dream experience. The Royal Archives at Mari contain extensive collections of dream reports submitted by officials throughout the kingdom as part of routine administrative correspondence. These documents, dated to approximately 1800 BC, demonstrate that dream interpretation functioned as a legitimate intelligence gathering system with professional interpreters, analyzing dream content for strategic information and early warning of potential threats. The Mari dream reports, preserved on over 50 tablets, provide unprecedented insight into how dream interpretation operated within government administration. These reports follow standardized formats indicating that bureaucratic procedures govern their submission and processing. Each report begins with the dreamer's name and official position, followed by the date using both the civil calendar and astronomical observations for precise timing. The dream content receives detailed description, including specific visual imagery, emotional responses, and any voices or communications experienced. The reports conclude with the dreamer's preliminary interpretation and recommendations for official action, if any. The variety of officials submitting dream reports demonstrates the widespread integration of dream interpretation into administrative culture. Governors from provincial cities, military commanders, temple administrators, and even merchants conducting state business all submitted reports when they experienced dreams deemed significant. Letter A, R. M. 10, 117 from the governor of Turkey describes a dream in which the god Dagon appeared and provided specific warnings about enemy movements. The governor requests that the king consult with dream specialists to determine appropriate military responses, and states that he has already begun defensive preparations based on his own interpretation, the royal response system for processing dream reports reveals sophisticated analytical procedures. Dreams classified as potentially significant were forwarded to professional interpreters attached to the royal court who provided formal interpretations and strategic recommendations. Tablet Arm 1323 preserves an interpreter's analysis of multiple dreams submitted by different officials that all contained similar symbolic elements. The interpreter identifies the recurring water imagery as indicating upcoming seasonal flooding and recommends preparations for potential disruptions to agricultural operations and transportation systems. This synthesis of information from multiple independent sources exemplifies how dream interpretation functioned as an intelligence analysis tool. The validation procedures applied to dream reports demonstrate skeptical evaluation rather than credulous acceptance. Royal correspondence includes inquiries about dreamers' ritual purity status, recent activities, and potential motivations for submitting particular reports. Letter A R 26398 shows King Zimri-Lim questioning whether a troubling dream reported by an official might reflect the official's personal anxieties about a failed assignment rather than genuine prophetic content. The king requests additional divination using liver omens to corroborate the dream interpretation before taking action on its warnings. The strategic information extracted from dream reports included military intelligence, political assessments, and economic forecasts. Dreams featuring specific deities were interpreted as communications from those divine powers regarding their spheres of influence. A dream of Adad, the storm god, might indicate upcoming weather patterns affecting agriculture, while dreams of Ishtar could relate to warfare or diplomatic relations. The systematic correlation of divine imagery with practical concerns created a framework for extracting actionable intelligence from symbolic content. The preservation of dream report outcomes enabled empirical assessment of interpretive accuracy. Several Mari tablets contain follow-up notations indicating whether predicted events actually occurred following dream warnings. Tablet ARM 26412 describes a dream warning of enemy attack that proved accurate when troops from Hashnuna invaded within the predicted timeframe. Such validation records would have allowed interpreters to refine their techniques based on documented successes and failures, creating an evidence-based approach to dream analysis. The integration of dreams with other divination methods created a comprehensive intelligence system. Royal archives show that important decisions typically required confirmation through multiple sources including dreams, liver omens, and astronomical observations. When these different methods provided concordant information, officials proceeded with high confidence. Discordant results prompted additional investigation and analysis. This multi-source verification approach demonstrates sophisticated understanding of information reliability and the limitations of individual divination techniques. The standardized dream interpretation manuals preserved from multiple Mesopotamian cities contain systematic classifications of dream symbols organized into hierarchical categories: water dreams, architectural dreams, animal encounters, and divine appearances each followed specific interpretive rules, based on detailed symbolic correspondences that were maintained with remarkable consistency across different regions and time periods. The most comprehensive symbolic classification system appears in the Assyrian dreambook tablets from Nineveh, particularly tablet K 3952, which organizes dream elements into 12 major categories, with multiple subcategories under each primary division. Water dreams occupy the first major category, with distinctions drawn between rivers, canals, wells, rain, floods, and standing pools. Each water type carries specific symbolic associations, with rivers representing journeys and transitions, wells indicating access to hidden knowledge, and floods warning of overwhelming circumstances. The manual provides further refinements based on water clarity, temperature, depth, and flow direction, creating an elaborate decision tree for interpretation. Architectural dreams form the second major category, with separate interpretive frameworks for houses, temples, palaces, city walls, and gates. The symbolic meaning shifts based on whether the dreamer observes structures from outside, enters them, or finds themselves already inside specific rooms. Dreams of ascending stairs or climbing walls receive positive interpretations associated with advancement and achievement, while descending into basements or cellars suggests confronting hidden aspects of situations. The condition of buildings matters significantly, with well-maintained structures indicating stability and ruins warning of deterioration in the dreamer's circumstances. Animal encounter dreams constitute the third major category, with over 200 specific creatures catalogued, including both domestic and wild species. Lions appearing in dreams typically represent royal power or divine authority, with the dream's outcome depending on whether the dreamer successfully confronts the lion, flees from it, or observes it from safety. Bulls symbolize economic prosperity and agricultural abundance, while serpents carry complex dual meanings, representing both wisdom and danger depending on dream context. Birds receive classification according to species, with eagles associated with divine messages, ravens with death omens, and doves with peaceful resolutions. The symbolic consistency across different cities and time periods reveals standardization that required institutional coordination. Comparison of dream manuals from Babylon, Nineveh, and Uruk spanning approximately 700 years shows nearly identical interpretations for hundreds of common dream symbols. This consistency suggests that scribal schools maintained central reference materials, and that students throughout Mesopotamia learned from essentially the same core curriculum. The standardization would have enabled dream interpreters trained in different cities to communicate effectively, and to provide comparable services to mobile populations, including merchants and military personnel. The hierarchical organization of symbolic categories reflects sophisticated taxonomic thinking. Major categories subdivide into increasingly specific classifications, creating multi-level decision trees for interpretation. Under the animal category, lions divide into attacking lions, distant lions, friendly lions, and wounded lions, with each subcategory generating different interpretations. Further refinements account for the number of lions, their size relative to normal proportions, and their coloration. This progressive specification enables precise interpretation while maintaining systematic organizational structure. The manuals include explicit instructions for handling ambiguous or unusual dreams that don't fit standard categories. Interpreters learned procedures for identifying the most salient dream elements, and prioritizing symbolic components based on emotional intensity, visual clarity, and thematic centrality. Dreams combining multiple major categories required synthetic interpretation that balanced potentially conflicting symbolic meanings. The texts describe how experienced interpreters developed intuitive judgment for weighting different symbolic elements appropriately when creating comprehensive interpretations. Regional variations in symbolic associations received acknowledgement in the more sophisticated interpretation manuals. Tablet B M 40,912. From the Sippar collection notes that certain agricultural symbols carry different meanings in southern marshland cities versus northern grain-producing regions. Dreams of date palms hold particular significance in the south, where dates constitute a primary crop, while dreams of barley fields receive enhanced attention in northern agricultural zones. This geographic sensitivity demonstrates that interpreters adapted standardized symbolic systems to local contexts while maintaining core interpretive principles. The preservation of these symbolic dictionaries through copying and recopying across many generations created opportunities for corruption and variation. Comparative textual analysis reveals that some symbols accumulated multiple interpretive traditions that occasionally contradicted each other. Later compilation tablets sometimes include editorial notes, acknowledging these discrepancies and providing guidance for resolving them. The editorial apparatus indicates that Mesopotamian scholars recognized textual transmission problems and developed critical methods for evaluating variant readings. Cuneiform philosophical texts describe dreams as occurring when the soul, or zakik, temporarily separates from the physical body and travels through different realms of existence. This sophisticated model of consciousness distinguished between different levels of dream experience based on how far the soul travelled from the body, with deeper journeys producing more significant prophetic content. The most detailed exposition of this dream theory appears in Tablet K 3456 from the Nineveh collection, which describes the zakik as a subtle spiritual component that normally remains joined to the physical body during waking consciousness, but gains mobility during sleep. The text employs the metaphor of a tethered bird to illustrate the relationship between soul and body during dreams. Just as a bird on a string can fly within limited range while remaining connected to its anchor point, the zakika can travel through various realms while maintaining connection to the sleeping body through what the text calls the silver cord. The cosmological framework for dream journeys divides existence into multiple realms or levels arranged vertically with the earthly plane occupying the middle position. Above the earth extend celestial realms inhabited by sky deities, while below lie underworld regions ruled by chthonic powers. During shallow dreams, the zakik rises or descends only short distances from the body, experiencing realms immediately adjacent to normal waking reality. These shallow dream journeys produce mundane dream content, reflecting daily concerns and recent experiences without significant prophetic import. Deeper dream states allow the zakik to travel farther into celestial or underworld regions, where it may encounter divine beings, deceased ancestors, or cosmic forces that communicate important information. The text describes specific physiological signs that indicate deep dream states, including particular patterns of breathing, eye movements beneath closed lids, and subtle tremors in the extremities. Temple attendants monitoring sleeping dreamers learned to recognize these signs and noted when they occurred for later correlation with dream reports. The dangers associated with deep dream journeys receive explicit discussion in protective ritual texts. If the silver cord connecting soul to body becomes too attenuated through excessive travel distance, the zakik may struggle to return properly, causing the dreamer to wake confused, disoriented, or suffering from what the texts call soul sickness. Severe cases might result in permanent separation producing death or profound alteration of personality. protective incantations recited before dream incubation sessions requested divine guardians to ensure safe return of the travelling soul. The theory distinguished between passive observation dreams and active participation dreams based on the dreamer's agency during the experience. In observation dreams, the Zakik witnesses events unfolding without ability to influence outcomes similar to watching scenes from a detached vantage point. These dreams typically provide information about situations beyond the dreamer's control, particularly useful for prophetic warnings about external threats. In participation dreams, the Zakik actively engages with dream environments and entities, suggesting that the soul has achieved greater mobility and power within the dream realms. The interpretation of dream content depended heavily on determining which realm the Zakik had visited during the experience. Dreams containing bright light, celestial imagery, and encounters with beneficent deities indicated travel to upper realms and generally received positive interpretations. Dreams featuring darkness, earth imagery, and meetings with underworld deities suggested descent to lower realms and required more cautious interpretation, considering both the wisdom such entities might offer and the potential threats they represented. The philosophical sophistication of this consciousness model becomes apparent when compared to contemporary psychological theories of dreaming. The Mesopotamian framework recognized that dream experiences differed qualitatively from waking consciousness, that dreams could provide access to information unavailable during normal awareness, and that dream states varied in depth and significance. Modern research on sleep stages and dream consciousness identifies similar patterns with rapid eye movement sleep, producing more vivid narrative dreams than non-REM stages, paralleling the Mesopotamian distinction between shallow and deep dream journeys. The practical application of dream theory required interpreters to question dreamers about their subjective experiences during sleep. Did the dream feel distant and observational, or immediate and participatory? Did the dreamer experience clear awareness of dreaming, or complete immersion in the dream reality? Did the dreamer encounter recognizable divine figures or unknown entities? These phenomenological details helped interpreters assess which realm the Zakik had visited, and thus how to properly decode the symbolic content. Babylonian divination manuals describe systematic procedures for correlating dream interpretations with hepatoscopy or liver divination results to achieve more accurate predictions. The technical texts indicate that professional diviners used multiple information sources simultaneously, comparing dream symbolism with anatomical features of sacrificial animals and celestial observations to triangulate prophetic insights. The integration protocols preserved in Tablet VOR-AT 9843 from the Berlin collection specify step-by-step procedures for conducting coordinated dream and liver divination sessions. The process began with the client providing a detailed dream report to the dream interpreter, who performed preliminary analysis, identifying key symbolic elements and potential interpretive directions. Before finalizing the dream interpretation, the diviner conducted hepatoscopy, examining the liver of a sacrificed sheep for omens that might confirm, contradict, or refine the dream reading. The liver examination followed standardized protocols that divided the organ into multiple zones, each associated with specific deities, cosmic forces, and areas of life. The gallbladder region connected with Shamash the sun god and matters of justice and truth. The caudate lobe associated with Sin, the moon god, and issues of time, cycles, and hidden influences. The portal vein system linked to Adad, the storm god, and concerns about weather, agriculture, and natural forces. Diviners learned to read variations in each zone, including discolorations, unusual formations, and size deviations as omens relevant to their associated domains. The correlation procedure required diviners to map dream symbols onto liver zones, identifying which anatomical regions should show confirmatory signs if the dream interpretation was correct. A dream interpreted as warning about legal troubles should produce corresponding markings in the Shamash zone of the liver. A dream suggesting agricultural problems should manifest omens in the Adad region. When liver signs aligned with dream interpretations, diviners proceeded with high confidence in their conclusions. Contradictory signs prompted reconsideration of the dream analysis or additional divination to resolve the discrepancy. Administrative records from the Mari Palace archives document actual application of these integration procedures. Tablet A, R, M, 26-214 describes a consultation where the Queen reported a troubling dream that initial interpretation suggested indicated palace intrigue. The diviner performed hepatoscopy, finding that the liver showed unusual markings in the zone, associated with hidden enemies, confirming the dream interpretation. Based on this concordant evidence, the king initiated investigation of court officials, ultimately uncovering an actual conspiracy. The successful resolution validated the integrated divination approach. The theoretical justification for combining divination methods appears in philosophical texts discussing cosmic interconnection. The universe operates as an integrated whole where events manifest simultaneously across multiple domains. A future occurrence destined to affect human affairs will cast shadows or generate signs in various spheres, including the dream realm, animal anatomy, and celestial movements. By examining multiple sign systems, diviners could detect convergent patterns that indicated genuine prophecy versus random noise or misinterpretation in any single channel. The statistical reliability of integrated divination exceeded individual methods according to empirical records maintained by temple divination departments. Compilation tablets from Babylon analysed outcomes from several hundred cases, comparing prediction accuracy using dreams alone, liver omens alone, or integrated approaches. The integrated method showed approximately 68% accuracy in retrospective analysis, compared to 49% for dreams alone and 53% for liver divination alone. While modern statistical standards would question these accuracy claims, the Mesopotamian attempt to empirically validate divination methods through systematic record-keeping demonstrates sophisticated methodological thinking. The training required for practicing integrated divination exceeded that needed for specialization in either method individually. Students had to master both dream interpretation and hepatoscopy, including their respective symbolic systems, technical procedures, and theoretical foundations. Educational texts from Uruk indicate that integrated divination training required approximately 12 years of study, compared to 7 years for dream interpretation alone, or 8 years for hepatoscopy alone. The extended training period and the rarity of practitioners who achieved competence in both domains made integrated diviners valuable specialists commanding premium fees. The 70-tablet compilation known as Enuma Anu Enlil represents perhaps the most comprehensive astronomical observation record from the ancient world, containing thousands of celestial omens collected over more than a millennium of systematic skywatching. Analysis of these tablets reveals mathematical sophistication in tracking planetary cycles, predicting eclipses, and correlating celestial events with terrestrial phenomena that exceeded contemporary capabilities. The compilation derives its name from the opening words Wen Anu and Enlil, which invoke the sky god, and the atmospheric god as the divine authorities governing celestial phenomena. The full series originally contained approximately 7,000 omen entries, organized according to celestial object type and phenomenon category. Tablets 1 through 22 cover lunar omens including lunar eclipses, halos, and conjunctions with stars and planets. Tablets 23 through 36 document solar phenomena. Tablets 37 through 49 catalogue weather omens. The remaining tablets address planetary movements, stellar observations, and meteorological phenomena. The lunar eclipse predictions preserved in tablets 15 through 20 demonstrate mathematical capabilities that required centuries of systematic observation to develop. The texts employ the Saros cycle, a period of 18 years, 11 days, 8 hours, after which eclipse patterns repeat with remarkable regularity. By tracking eclipses across multiple Saros cycles, Babylonian astronomers could predict future eclipses decades in advance with accuracy that modern calculations confirm. Tablet K 160 from Nineveh contains eclipse predictions for a 50-year period, all of which occurred within the predicted months and most within the predicted dates. The planetary observation records reveal detailed knowledge of synodic periods for all 5 visible planets. Venus receives particularly extensive treatment, with tablets documenting the 8-year cycle of Venus appearances and disappearances with precision to within single days. Mars observations track the approximately 780-day synodic period through multiple cycles, identifying the variation in apparition duration and retrograde motion timing. Jupiter and Saturn records demonstrate understanding of their longer cycles, with mathematical tables predicting positions years into the future. The omen correlations themselves follow sophisticated statistical thinking, even if not expressed in modern mathematical terms. The texts distinguish between frequently observed celestial events that showed strong correlation with subsequent terrestrial outcomes versus rare events that might be coincidental. Lunar halos occurred often enough that observers could track whether they consistently predicted rain within specific timeframes. Multiple independent observations of halo rainfall sequences established the correlation reliability. Conversely, the texts acknowledge uncertainty about rare cometary appearances, where limited observational history prevented confident correlation establishment. The geographic scope of observations contributing to Enuma Anu Enlil extended beyond Babylon to include data from observation posts throughout Mesopotamia and surrounding regions. Administrative correspondence describes coordination between observation centers at Babylon, Uruk, Sippar, and Borsippa, with observers reporting unusual phenomena to central compilation authorities. This distributed observation network enabled detection of events visible from some locations but not others, and allowed triangulation of atmospheric phenomena to determine their altitude and distance. The temporal depth of the observation program emerges from internal textual evidence, referring to observations from the Old Babylonian period, approximately 1000 BCE, incorporated into later Neo-Assyrian and Neo-Babylonian compilations. Some tablet colophons explicitly state that they preserve copies of ancient observations from the time of King Hammurabi or earlier. The continuity of observation and compilation across this time span required stable institutional structures and dedicated resources that Mesopotamian temple systems successfully maintained. The famous Venus tablets of Amisaduqa preserve 21 years of detailed observations tracking the planet Venus through its synodic cycle with mathematical precision that demonstrates advanced understanding of planetary mechanics. These observations served as the foundation for a complex omen system that associated specific Venus positions with predictions about warfare, agricultural yields, and political stability. The tablets designated Enuma Anu Enlil tablets 63 through 65 contain the Amisaduqa Venus observations dated to the 17th century BCE during the First Babylonian dynasty. The text records the dates when Venus first became visible in the eastern sky before sunrise, when it disappeared from morning visibility, when it reappeared in the western sky after sunset, and when it disappeared from evening visibility. These 4 critical points in the Venus cycle received precise dating using the Babylonian calendar, with day and month specified for each observation. The mathematical analysis of these observations reveals understanding of Venus' synodic period, the 584-day cycle, between successive similar configurations. The tablets track Venus through approximately 36 complete synodic cycles spanning the 21-year observation period, Modern astronomical calculations back-projecting Venus positions to the 2nd millennium BCE confirm that the recorded observation dates match actual Venus phenomena, with accuracy typically within 1 or 2 days, accounting for potential calendar conversion uncertainties. The omen system built upon Venus observations assigned specific meanings to each phase of the cycle. When Venus appeared as morning star after superior conjunction, omens focused on military affairs and royal power. The texts associate this eastern appearance with the warrior goddess Ishtar in her martial aspect, and interpret the brightness and duration of visibility as indicators of military success or failure. Particularly bright morning star appearances predicted victory in warfare, while dim or brief appearances warned of military setbacks. When Venus transitioned to evening star after inferior conjunction, omen interpretation shifted toward agricultural and economic concerns. The Western appearance connected with Ishtar in her fertility aspect, and the visibility duration correlated with harvest predictions. Long evening star apparitions indicated abundant crops and economic prosperity, while short appearances warned of agricultural difficulties and economic stress. The texts provide specific quantitative thresholds, with visibility durations exceeding certain day counts, triggering positive omens, while shorter durations activated negative predictions. The integration of Venus omens with terrestrial event records enabled empirical validation of correlation patterns. Historical chronicles from the Amisaduqa period, preserved alongside the Venus observations, document actual military campaigns, harvest outcomes, and economic conditions, allowing retrospective comparison with Venus-based predictions. While complete outcome records don't survive for all predicted events, available evidence suggests that Babylonian astronomers achieved modest predictive success, particularly for seasonal agricultural forecasts, where Venus evening star timing correlated with optimal planting periods. The precision required for Venus observations demanded specialized equipment and trained observers. The texts describe observation procedures requiring clear horizon visibility in both eastern and western directions, precise time measurement capabilities for determining exact appearance moments, and consistent observation schedules maintaining watch during predicted visibility windows. Temple astronomy platforms provided elevated observation points with unobstructed horizon views, while water clocks enabled time measurement with sufficient precision for dating observations to specific days. The transmission of Venus observation methods to later astronomical traditions demonstrates the enduring influence of Babylonian planetary studies. Greek astronomers of the Hellenistic period acknowledged Babylonian sources for their Venus cycle knowledge. The 8-year Venus cycle appears in Greek astronomical texts with explicit attribution to Chaldean astronomers. The mathematical tables for calculating Venus positions developed during the Seleucid period built directly upon the observation foundations established in the Amisaduqa tablets, and refined through subsequent centuries of continuous planetary monitoring. Babylonian astronomical texts contain eclipse prediction tables using the Saros cycle that enabled accurate forecasting of lunar eclipses decades in advance. Temple ritual manuals describe elaborate ceremonies performed during predicted eclipses, designed to avert negative omens, demonstrating that astronomical knowledge served both predictive and preventive functions. The Saros cycle, spanning 6,585 and 1/3 days, or approximately 18 years, 11 days and 8 hours, represents one of the most significant discoveries in ancient astronomy. Babylonian observers recognized that lunar eclipses repeat in similar patterns after this interval, with eclipses occurring at the same node of the Moon's orbit under comparable geometric conditions. Tablet BM 35,308 from the British Museum collection contains a systematic compilation of eclipse records organized according to Saros cycle relationships, demonstrating that astronomers track these patterns across multiple generations of observations. The prediction tables preserved in these texts extend forward from known eclipses using Saros calculations to forecast future events with remarkable accuracy. One particularly complete prediction sequence appears in Tablet K 570 from Nineveh, covering a 40-year period from approximately 670 BCE to 630 BCE. Modern astronomical back calculation confirms that all predicted eclipses in this sequence actually occurred with the predicted dates accurate to within 1 or 2 days in most cases. The small discrepancies result from the 1/3 day remainder in the Saros period, which causes successive eclipses to shift westward in visibility zones, requiring periodic adjustment in the prediction scheme. The mathematical sophistication required for maintaining Saros cycle calculations across extended periods exceeded simple pattern recognition. Astronomers needed to track multiple simultaneous Saros series since eclipses occur in different geometric configurations, producing distinct series with different characteristics. The text identify at least 40 concurrent Saros series active at any given time, with individual series containing approximately 70 to 80 eclipses before geometric conditions shift sufficiently to terminate the sequence. Managing this complex web of overlapping cycles required sophisticated record-keeping systems and mathematical tools for calculating eclipse circumstances. The ritual response protocols activated by eclipse predictions appear in temple administrative texts from Babylon and Uruk. When astronomers predicted an upcoming lunar eclipse, temple authorities initiated elaborate ceremonies designed to avert negative omens associated with the event. Tablet VAT 7847 describes a 9-day ritual sequence, beginning 6 days before the predicted eclipse and continuing through 2 days after the event. The ceremonies involved offerings to lunar deities, recitation of protective incantations, and performance of substitution rituals where symbolic objects absorb the evil portended by the eclipse. The substitution ritual protocols reveal sophisticated thinking about causality and divine agency. The texts describe how creating symbolic representations of threatened entities and subjecting these representations to ritual destruction would satisfy the cosmic requirement for destructive events to occur while sparing the actual threatened targets. If an eclipse portended danger to the king, priests created a substitute king using a criminal or social outcast who underwent abbreviated coronation ceremonies before being ritually executed after the eclipse passed. This practice, documented in multiple Neo-Assyrian royal correspondence letters, demonstrates that astronomical predictions directly influence state security procedures. The economic resources devoted to eclipse rituals indicate the high priority placed on averting predicted omens. Administrative records from the Ababa temple at Sippar document expenditures for a single eclipse ritual, totaling approximately 30 shekels of silver for sacrificial animals, 15 shekels for aromatic substances, and substantial quantities of grain, oil, and beer for offerings and ceremonial feasts. These costs represent several months of wages for skilled labourers, suggesting that eclipse mitigation consumed significant temple resources, particularly during periods when multiple predicted eclipses occurred in close succession. The empirical assessment of ritual effectiveness appears in compilation texts that compare predicted eclipse omens with actual subsequent events. These retrospective analyses attempt to determine whether performed rituals successfully averted predicted negative outcomes or whether events transpired despite ritual interventions. While the interpretive framework assumes ritual efficacy and explains apparent failures through improper performance or insufficient offerings, the systematic effort to document outcomes demonstrates empirical thinking about cause and effect relationships. The division of the night sky into 3 pathways associated with Anu, Enlil, and Ea created a comprehensive system for interpreting stellar omens based on which celestial zone particular phenomena appeared in. Administrative texts describe professional astronomers maintaining continuous observation schedules to monitor all 3 pathways simultaneously. The three-pathway system divides the celestial sphere into horizontal bands extending across the entire sky from east to west. The path of Anu encompasses the central celestial region from approximately 15 degrees north declination to 15 degrees south declination, including the zodiacal constellations through which the Sun, Moon, and planets travel. The path of Enlil covers the northern celestial region from 15 degrees north declination to the north celestial pole, containing circumpolar constellations that never set below the horizon at Babylonian latitudes. The path of Ea extends across the southern celestial region from 15 degrees south declination to the south celestial pole, including stars visible from Mesopotamia only during specific seasons. The astronomical texts assign specific constellation groups to each pathway, with detailed catalogues preserved in the starlist compilation known as emule.apin. The path of Anu contains 33 constellations, including the 12 zodiacal signs, plus additional stellar groups along the ecliptic zone. The path of Enlil includes 23 northern constellations, among them the Wagon of Heaven, corresponding to modern Ursa Major, and the Standing Gods, corresponding to parts of modern Cygnus and Lyra. The path of Ea catalogues 15 southern constellations, visible from Mesopotamian latitudes, including the Arrow, corresponding to modern Canis Major and Sirius. The Omen interpretation system attached differential significance to celestial events based on pathway location. Phenomena appearing in the path of Anu carried the greatest importance for royal and state affairs, since this central zone, associated with the supreme deity, governed matters of kingship, warfare, and political stability. Events in the path of Enlil related to atmospheric conditions, agricultural concerns, and seasonal patterns, reflecting Enlil's role as deity of air and storms. Occurrences in the path of Ea connected with water management, foundations, wisdom, and subterranean matters, corresponding to Ea's dominion over the underground freshwater ocean. The observation protocols required continuous monitoring of all three pathways throughout the night to ensure that no significant phenomena escaped detection. Administrative tablets from the Asagila Temple in Babylon describe observer assignments with different astronomers responsible for specific pathway sections during assigned watch periods. The texts indicate that observation teams typically consisted of at least 3 astronomers working simultaneously, with each focused on one pathway zone. This coordinated observation system enabled comprehensive sky coverage, despite the physical impossibility of any individual observer watching the entire visible hemisphere at once. The equipment used for pathway observations included sighting devices that defined horizontal bands corresponding to the pathway boundaries. Archaeological evidence from Babylon and Uruk reveals the remains of observation platforms with permanent markers indicating declination zones visible from specific observation points. These markers consisted of stone pillars or wooden posts positioned at calculated distances and heights that established sight lines corresponding to pathway boundaries. Observers used these reference points to determine which pathway contained particular celestial events, enabling rapid omen classification without requiring complex mathematical calculations. The seasonal variation in pathway visibility created observation challenges that required careful planning. The path of Ea containing southerly stars remained below the horizon during summer months from northern Mesopotamian observation sites, while winter nights brought these constellations into view. The observation schedules preserved in administrative texts show rotation patterns that concentrated resources on the most visible pathways during each season, while maintaining minimal coverage of zones near the horizon, or subject to atmospheric interference. The pathway system influenced the organization of astronomical knowledge transmission through scribal schools. Educational texts from Uruk indicate that students learned constellation identification organized by pathway, with the path of Anu receiving primary attention due to its omen significance. Advanced students proceeded to study the paths of Enlil and Ea in sequence. This pedagogical structure ensured that even astronomers with incomplete training could provide basic services focused on the most important celestial zone, while specialists who completed the full curriculum achieved comprehensive sky knowledge. Cuneiform omen collections include extensive series devoted to meteorological phenomena, including cloud formations, wind patterns, thunder characteristics, and precipitation types. The systematic correlation of weather observations with subsequent events suggests Mesopotamian scholars recognized atmospheric patterns that enabled practical short-term forecasting. The meteorological omen series preserved in Enuma Anu Enlil tablets 40 through 49 contain approximately 1,500 individual omens, covering virtually every observable weather phenomenon. Cloud omens constitute the largest category, with detailed classifications based on cloud color, shape, direction of movement, altitude, and time of appearance. Tablet 44 distinguishes between at least 12 distinct cloud types, using descriptive terminology that modern meteorological analysis can correlate with standard cloud classifications. The white-piled clouds described in the text correspond to cumulus formations, while the stretched-out high clouds match cirrus characteristics. The wind omen text demonstrates sophisticated attention to directional patterns and seasonal variations. The four cardinal wind directions receive individual treatment, with north winds, south winds, east winds, and west winds each associated with different seasonal expectations and omen interpretations. The texts recognize that north winds during summer bring cooling and often precede precipitation, while south winds during winter carry warming and typically indicate dry conditions. This understanding of prevailing wind patterns and their seasonal effects enabled practical weather forecasting that informed agricultural planning and military campaign timing. Thunder omens incorporate acoustic characteristics including volume, duration, pitch, and timing within storm sequences. The texts distinguish between continuous rolling thunder and sharp isolated thunderclaps, assigning different predictive meanings to each pattern. Thunder occurring before rainfall receives different interpretation than thunder following precipitation onset. The association of thunder characteristics with storm severity and duration demonstrates observational correlation between acoustic phenomena and meteorological outcomes that modern atmospheric physics recognizes as valid relationships. The precipitation omen texts classify rainfall, hail, and snow according to intensity, duration, and seasonal timing. Light brief showers receive different interpretations than sustained heavy rainfall, with the texts providing quantitative thresholds based on observable effects such as puddle formation, stream flooding, and ground saturation. Hail omens distinguish between small hail that bounces on impact and large hail that breaks plant stems or damages structures. These practical distinctions enabled assessment of agricultural impact and informed damage control responses. The correlation procedures described in the omen texts reveal systematic empirical methodology. Observers recorded meteorological phenomena with date, time, and detailed descriptions, then tracked subsequent events over defined follow-up periods, ranging from 1 day to 1 month depending on omen category. Agricultural outcomes, political developments, epidemic diseases, and military events received documentation, with retrospective analysis identifying patterns where specific weather phenomena consistently preceded particular event categories. The statistical thinking implicit in these correlation studies appears in editorial comments within the Omen compilations. Some texts note that certain weather patterns consistently predict subsequent events with high reliability, while other patterns show weaker or inconsistent correlations. The distinction between reliable and unreliable omens demonstrates awareness that correlation strength varies, and that systematic observation can identify which patterns merit predictive confidence versus which represent spurious associations. The practical application of meteorological omens extended beyond symbolic divination, to include genuine weather forecasting for agricultural and military purposes. Royal correspondence from the Neo-Assyrian period includes requests for weather predictions before military. Campaigns with astronomers providing forecasts based on observed atmospheric conditions and seasonal patterns. The accuracy of these forecasts likely varied considerably, but the continued reliance on astronomical advisors for weather prediction suggests that they achieved sufficient success to maintain institutional credibility. Omen texts document hundreds of correlations between unusual animal behaviors and subsequent human events, from the flight patterns of birds to the movements of insects, and the appearance of wild animals in urban areas. The detailed naturalistic observations preserved in these texts demonstrate sophisticated attention to ecological patterns and animal ethology. The Bird Omen series represents one of the most extensive animal observation compilations, with texts cataloguing flight patterns, vocalizations, nesting behaviors, and migration timing for numerous avian species. The systematic organization appears in tablet sequences from Nineveh that classify bird omens according to species, with separate sections for ravens, eagles, vultures, doves, swallows, and various waterfowl. Each species section subdivides based on behavioral categories including flight direction, call types, perching locations, and interactions between multiple birds. The flight direction omens reveal attention to both absolute compass directions and relative positions. A raven flying from east to west across the observer's field of view receives different interpretation than one flying north to south. The texts further distinguish between direct linear flight paths and circling or erratic flight patterns, with spiraling flight generally indicating more significant omens than straight trajectories. The height of flight also matters, with high-altitude flight suggesting distant events, while low flight near ground level indicates imminent local occurrences. The vocalization omens demonstrate remarkable attention to acoustic detail, distinguishing between numerous call types and their contextual meanings. Raven omens differentiate between harsh croaking calls, softer warbling sounds, and rapid repetitive calls, with each vocalization pattern associated with different predictive content. The texts note that calls occurring at unusual times, such as ravens crying during midday rather than dawn, or dusk, carry enhanced omen significance. This temporal sensitivity shows awareness that normal behavior patterns establish baselines, against which unusual occurrences become meaningful. The insect omens include detailed observations of locust swarms, ant behavior, and the appearance of various flying insects in buildings or around people. Locust omen texts describe swarm density, flight direction, crop selection, and the extent of agricultural damage, with correlations to subsequent food availability and economic conditions. These observations had obvious practical utility for agricultural planning and famine prediction beyond purely symbolic omen interpretation. Ant behavior omens track the movement of ant columns, nest construction activity, and the transport of food items, with unusual patterns interpreted as indicators of upcoming weather changes or social disruptions. The urban wildlife omens document the appearance of normally wild animals within city boundaries, treating these boundary crossings as significant disruptions of natural order. Texts describe omens associated with foxes entering city gates, wolves appearing on city walls, and snakes found in public buildings or private homes. The interpretation framework treats these urban incursions as symbolic invasions presaging human threats or social disorder. Modern ecological understanding recognizes that unusual wildlife behavior often results from environmental disruptions that might indeed correlate with conditions affecting human populations, such as droughts, floods, or epidemic diseases that alter normal ecological patterns. The domestic animal behavior omens focus on cattle, sheep, goats, horses, and dogs, with attention to deviations from normal behavioral patterns. Texts describe omens associated with cattle refusing to enter barns, dogs howling at unusual times, horses exhibiting nervousness or agitation, and sheep displaying abnormal flocking behavior. Some of these behavioral changes might reflect animal sensitivity to environmental conditions not yet perceived by human observers, such as approaching storms, seismic tremors, or other atmospheric or geological phenomena that animals detect before humans recognize them. The breeding and birth behavior omens track animal reproductive cycles and birthing outcomes with correlations to human fertility and general prosperity. Texts note when domestic animals produce unusually large or small litters, when birthing occurs outside normal seasonal patterns, and when offspring display unusual characteristics. The statistical tracking of these patterns over extended periods could have revealed genuine correlations between animal reproductive success and environmental conditions affecting human agriculture and health. The extensive collections of birth omens preserved in cuneiform texts document detailed observations of human and animal birth abnormalities with their associated predictions. These texts reveal systematic study of developmental anomalies and their statistical correlation with subsequent events representing an early form of teratological research. The human birth omen series, known by its Akkadian title Shuma Isbu, meaning if a malformed child, contains approximately 200 tablets documenting virtually every imaginable congenital anomaly. The systematic organization proceeds from head to toe with separate sections devoted to cranial abnormalities, facial malformations, limb defects, and internal organ anomalies discovered during stillbirths. Each entry describes the physical abnormality in clinical detail, then provides the associated omen interpretation, typically predicting events affecting the household, city, or kingdom, depending on the severity and type of malformation. The cranial abnormalities receive particularly detailed treatment, with texts distinguishing between various skull shape irregularities, fontanelle abnormalities, and unusual hair patterns. Hydrocephalic births with enlarged fluid-filled heads receive specific documentation with the degree of enlargement correlated to omen severity. Anencephalic births lacking normal cranial development generate the most serious omens, typically predicting dynastic changes or major political disruptions. The clinical accuracy of these descriptions demonstrates that the observers possess detailed anatomical knowledge and carefully documented birth outcomes. The facial malformation omens catalogue cleft lips, cleft palates, cyclopia, and various eye, ear, and nose abnormalities. The texts use precise descriptive language that enables modern medical correlation with specific developmental disorders. Cyclopic births with fused or centrally located eyes receive extensive treatment with variations based on the degree of facial fusion and the presence or absence of proboscis-like nasal structures. The consistency of these descriptions across multiple texts indicates standardized observation protocols and shared anatomical knowledge among practitioners. The limb abnormality omens document polydactyly, syndactyly, limb reduction defects, and various joint malformations. The texts distinguish between supernumerary digits on hands versus feet, and note the specific number and position of extra digits. Tablet 15 of the Shuma Isbu series contains approximately 40 entries devoted to polydactyly variations, demonstrating the detailed attention given to relatively common abnormalities. The statistical frequency of certain malformations evident in the extensive documentation suggests that observers maintained careful records of birth outcomes across large populations. The animal birth omens focus primarily on domestic livestock, with detailed catalogues of abnormalities in sheep, goats, cattle, horses, and pigs. The texts describe conjoined twin births, organ duplications, colour variations, and structural malformations using terminology that parallels human teratology entries. The economic importance of livestock health made these observations practically significant beyond symbolic omen interpretation, as birth defect rates might indicate environmental contamination, disease prevalence, or genetic problems within breeding populations. The correlation methodology linking birth abnormalities to subsequent events involved tracking outcomes over defined follow-up periods. The texts specify that certain anomalies predict events within 1 month, while others indicate longer-term developments extending to 1 year or more. The household-level omens associated with minor abnormalities received validation through relatively short follow-up periods, while kingdom-level predictions linked to severe malformations required extended observation to assess accuracy. The preservation of negative outcomes where predicted events failed to occur appears in some compilation texts that include editorial notes acknowledging prediction failures. These annotations demonstrate that practitioners maintained sufficiently detailed records to enable retrospective accuracy assessment. The willingness to document failures alongside successes suggests that the birth omen system valued empirical validation over maintaining claims of infallibility. The transmission of teratological knowledge to later medical traditions appears in Greek and Roman medical texts that reference Babylonian birth omen collections. The Hippocratic corpus includes teratological observations using descriptive terminology that shows Mesopotamian influence, while Roman natural history compilations cite Chaldean sources for birth defect catalogues. This knowledge transmission established foundations for later medical embryology and the systematic study of developmental abnormalities. The Lecanomancy text describing oil-on-water divination contains surprisingly sophisticated observations of fluid dynamics, surface tension phenomena, and pattern formation. The detailed technical vocabulary used to describe oil behavior suggests professional diviners developed specialized knowledge of physical principles governing liquid interactions. The oil divination procedure preserved in Tablet K 2405 from the British Museum collection describes a systematic protocol beginning with preparation of a bronze bowl filled with clean water to a specified depth of approximately 4 finger widths. The text emphasizes that the water must remain completely still before oil introduction, with diviners waiting for surface ripples to subside, completely ensuring a mirror-smooth starting condition. This attention to initial conditions demonstrates understanding that subsequent pattern formation depends critically on baseline environmental stability. The oil introduction technique required precise control over droplet size and release height. The texts describe using a thin reed or bronze stylus to transfer single drops of sesame oil from a preparation vessel to the water surface. The release height matters significantly, with drops from greater heights penetrating deeper into the water column and generating different spreading patterns than gently placed surface drops. The technical manuals distinguish between high release producing circular wave patterns and low release generating slower radial spreading with minimal disturbance. This sensitivity to release parameters shows empirical recognition of how gravitational potential energy affects fluid interaction dynamics. The pattern classification system catalogues dozens of distinct oil behavior types using specialized descriptive terminology. Terms like oil that stands indicate droplets maintaining cohesive circular forms without spreading, while oil that runs describes rapid radial expansion across the water surface. The oil that divides refers to droplets fragmenting into multiple smaller droplets, while oil that sinks describes the unusual phenomenon of oil penetrating below the water surface, typically indicating contamination or density anomalies. Each pattern category receives detailed subcategorization based on spreading rate, final diameter, edge characteristics, and interaction with vessel boundaries. The spreading dynamics receive particularly detailed attention, with texts distinguishing between uniform radial spreading and asymmetric directional spreading. When oil spreads evenly in all directions, forming perfect circles, the omen interpretation differs from cases where spreading favours particular compass directions, creating elongated or irregular shapes. The directional bias in spreading could result from subtle water surface currents, temperature gradients, or vessel tilt, all factors that modern fluid mechanics recognizes as influencing surface tension-driven flows. The diviner's ability to detect and interpret these subtle asymmetries demonstrates remarkable observational acuity. The interaction patterns between multiple oil drops receive systematic documentation, with text describing how sequential drops affect each other's spreading behavior. When a second drop lands near a previously placed drop, the two oil patches may merge, repel each other, or maintain separation depending on timing, spacing, and droplet sizes. The texts catalogue these interaction modes using terms that modern colloid science would recognize as describing coalescence, electrostatic repulsion, and stable emulsion formation. The systematic exploration of multi-drop interactions suggests that diviners conducted deliberate experiments, varying parameters to understand governing principles. The time evolution of oil patterns receives attention with texts, noting that initial spreading patterns often change over extended observation periods. Oil that initially spreads rapidly may subsequently contract or fragment, while stable circular patches may develop irregular edges or secondary spreading phases. The temporal dynamics descriptions indicate that diviners observed patterns for standardized durations, ensuring that interpretations incorporated both immediate and delayed responses. This temporal sensitivity parallels modern rheological studies, examining how complex fluids evolve under varying stress conditions. The environmental factors affecting oil behavior receive explicit discussion in the technical texts. Water temperature significantly influences spreading rates with warmer water, producing faster spreading than cold water. The text describes seasonal adjustments to observation protocols accounting for temperature effects on pattern formation. Atmospheric conditions also matter with texts, noting that wind-induced surface ripples interfere with pattern formation, requiring indoor performance in enclosed spaces when outdoor conditions prove unsuitable. This environmental awareness demonstrates that practitioners distinguish between pattern variations resulting from inherent omen significance versus those caused by controllable external factors. The chemical properties of oils receive attention with texts distinguishing between sesame oil, linseed oil, and cedar oil as producing different spreading characteristics. Sesame oil serves as the standard medium, but some divination contexts specify alternative oils for particular questions. The recognition that different oils behave differently on water surfaces reflects empirical understanding of how molecular structure and composition affect surface tension properties. Modern interfacial chemistry confirms that different oils have distinct surface tension values and spreading coefficients that produce the behavioral differences ancient diviners observed and catalogued. Administrative texts from major temple complexes describe coordination between different divination specialists who cross-reference their results to achieve consensus predictions. This systematic integration of multiple information sources created a comprehensive decision support system that combined astronomical, anatomical, behavioral, and symbolic data. The organizational structure of divination departments at major temples assigned specific roles to specialists in different methodologies. The Esagila Temple Archive from Babylon preserves administrative tablets listing personnel rosters that include dream interpreters, hepatoscopy practitioners, astronomical observers, oil divination specialists, and birth omen experts. These specialists operated semi-independently, maintaining their respective expertise domains, while participating in coordinated consultation processes when complex questions required comprehensive analysis. The consultation protocols for major decisions involve sequential engagement of multiple divination specialists, with results compiled and compared before final recommendations. Tablet Veti 12,943 describes procedures implemented when King Nebuchadnezzar consulted diviners regarding a proposed military campaign against Egypt. The process began with dream interpreters analyzing royal dreams from the preceding month, followed by hepatoscopy examinations of multiple sacrificial sheep. Astronomical observers provided reports on recent celestial phenomena, particularly planetary positions and any unusual stellar events, Oil divination specialists performed lecanomancy sessions focused specifically on military outcomes. The combined results underwent synthesis by senior temple officials, who identified consensus predictions and flagged contradictions requiring additional investigation. The contradiction resolution protocols demonstrate sophisticated thinking about information reliability and source credibility. When different divination methods produce conflicting predictions, administrators assess the internal consistency and strength of evidence within each methodology. A dream interpretation supported by clear symbolic content and appropriate astronomical timing received higher weight than ambiguous dreams from ritually impure dreamers. Liver examinations showing multiple concordant omens across different organ zones carried more credibility than isolated anomalies in single regions. The weighting system enabled rational integration of partially contradictory evidence rather than simple majority voting among methods. The consensus-building process involved deliberative meetings between senior practitioners from different specializations. Royal correspondence from Mari includes letters describing divination councils, where specialists debated interpretations and challenged each other's conclusions. These exchanges sometimes grew contentious, with astronomical observers questioning the reliability of dream reports or hepatoscopy practitioners disputing oil divination interpretations. The institutional tolerance for such professional disagreement suggests that divination practice valued critical evaluation over automatic deference to authority. The empirical validation procedures tracked prediction outcomes, enabling retrospective assessment of which divination combinations produced most reliable results. Compilation tablets from Sippar contain case summaries documenting original predictions, the divination methods employed, and subsequent outcome verification. Statistical patterns emerge from these records with integrated approaches combining 3 or more methods, showing higher accuracy rates than single-method consultations. The data suggest that consensus predictions where multiple independent methods agreed achieved approximately 70% accuracy, while contradictory predictions showed only 45% accuracy. These empirical findings reinforced institutional commitment to integrated, multi-method approaches. The economic efficiency of integrated divination required careful cost-benefit analysis, since employing multiple specialists increased consultation expenses. Temple administrators developed guidelines specifying when comprehensive multi-method divination justified its costs, versus when single-method consultation sufficed. Routine administrative questions affecting individual households typically received single-method treatment, often through dream interpretation or oil. Divination, military campaigns, major construction projects, and diplomatic initiatives warranted full multi-method analysis given their high stakes and substantial resource commitments. This tiered approach optimized resource allocation while maintaining comprehensive capabilities for critical decisions. The training requirements for coordination specialists who synthesized multi-method results exceeded those for individual methodology practitioners. These integration specialists needed functional knowledge across all major divination systems, enabling them to evaluate the technical quality of specialist reports and identify meaningful patterns across different information sources. Educational texts from Uruk describe advanced training programs lasting approximately 15 years that produced graduates capable of serving as chief divination officers in major temple complexes or royal courts. The institutional memory preservation systems maintained historical records of divination consultations and outcomes, creating databases supporting pattern recognition and methodology refinement. These archives, organized chronologically and thematically, enabled practitioners to reference previous cases with similar characteristics. When confronting unusual divination questions, specialists could research historical precedents, identifying comparable situations and reviewing how previous predictions performed. This systematic use of historical data parallels modern evidence-based decision support systems that leverage past experience to inform current choices. Royal correspondence from the Neo-Assyrian period documents how kings consulted dream interpreters before major military campaigns, diplomatic initiatives, and construction projects. The political influence of professional diviners based on their interpretive expertise demonstrates that omen systems functioned as practical advisory services rather than mere superstition. The extensive dream report collections from the reigns of Esarhaddon and Ashurbanipal, spanning approximately 681 to 627 BCE, provide detailed documentation of royal divination practices. These archives preserve over 100 individual dream reports submitted by royal family members, high officials, and professional dream scribes charged with recording royal nocturnal experiences. The systematic collection and preservation of these reports demonstrates that dream interpretation constituted an official state function with dedicated administrative infrastructure and personnel. The political significance of dream omens appears clearly in correspondence regarding military planning. Letter A. A10-194 describes how King Esarhaddon delayed a planned campaign against the Sumerians after court. Dream interpreters analysed troubling dreams experienced by the Queen Mother. The dreams featured imagery of defeat and royal humiliation, which interpreters assessed as divine warnings against proceeding with the campaign during the current astronomical period. The king accepted this advice, postponing military action until more favourable omens emerged. Historical records indicate that when the campaign eventually proceeded 6 months later, under improved omen conditions, it achieved successful outcomes, validating the cautious approach. The diplomatic applications of dream divination shaped treaty negotiations and alliance formations. Correspondence between Assyrian and Babylonian courts includes references to dream consultations preceding major diplomatic initiatives. Letter A, BL 347 describes how Babylonian king Shamash-Shumukin consulted dream interpreters before agreeing to tributary arrangements with Assyria. The interpreters analysed dreams featuring Shamash the sun god, who appeared to endorse the proposed agreements. This divine endorsement provided religious legitimation for politically controversial decisions, enabling rulers to justify difficult choices by citing supernatural guidance rather than merely practical considerations. The construction project divination protocols required dream consultation before initiating major building programs. The foundation inscriptions from Sennacherib's palace at Nineveh describe how dream omens confirmed divine approval for the construction location and design. Temple rebuilding projects received particularly intensive divination scrutiny, since religious structures required explicit divine authorization. Administrative records from the Asargala temple renovation under Esarhaddon document multiple rounds of dream consultation as construction plans developed, with interpreters verifying that each design modification maintained divine favor. The personal influence wielded by successful dream interpreters positioned them as powerful political advisors with direct access to royal decision-making. Several dream specialists appear repeatedly in royal correspondence over extended periods, suggesting they maintained long-term advisory relationships with monarchs. The interpreter Nabu-Zerulesha served Esarhaddon for over 15 years, providing dream analysis that influenced numerous royal decisions. His letters demonstrate sophisticated political awareness, as he crafted interpretations that acknowledged practical realities while maintaining religious frameworks. This political sophistication enabled effective advisory service that integrated divine guidance with pragmatic statecraft. The succession politics surrounding royal transitions involved intensive dream divination, as competing claimants sought supernatural legitimation. During the succession crisis following Sennacherib's assassination in 681 BCE, multiple claimants reported dreams supporting their rival claims to kingship. Esarhaddon's successful consolidation of power involved systematic presentation of dream omens favouring his succession including dreams experienced by his supporters throughout the empire. The coordinated dream campaign suggests deliberate political deployment of divination systems to shape succession outcomes. The accountability mechanisms for dream interpreters created professional risks when predictions proved incorrect, or when royal outcomes contradicted omen interpretations. Several letters document cases where interpreters faced royal displeasure following failed predictions. However, the interpretive flexibility inherent in symbolic analysis typically enabled practitioners to explain apparent failures through post hoc analysis of overlooked factors or improper ritual preparations. The professional survival of dream interpreters despite occasional prediction failures indicates that the symbolic framework provided sufficient interpretive latitude to maintain credibility across varying outcomes. Greek texts from the classical period acknowledge Mesopotamian origins of various divination practices, including astrology and dream interpretation. The technical vocabulary and methodological similarities between Babylonian and Greek systems demonstrate direct knowledge transmission through scholarly contacts during the Persian and Hellenistic periods. The Greek recognition of Babylonian astronomical expertise appears explicitly in texts by Herodotus, who, writing around 440 BCE, attributes the division of day into 12 hours and the invention of the sundial to Babylonian astronomers. While these specific claims oversimplify complex developmental histories, they demonstrate Greek awareness of Mesopotamian contributions to timekeeping and astronomical observation. Herodotus describes the Chaldeans as maintaining continuous observation traditions spanning many generations, enabling astronomical knowledge accumulation impossible within shorter Greek institutional timescales. The transmission mechanisms for astronomical knowledge involve direct scholarly contacts between Greek intellectuals and Babylonian temple astronomers during the Persian period. The Greek mathematician and astronomer Thales of Miletus, who flourished around 600 BCE, reportedly studied with Babylonian astronomers, learning eclipse prediction methods that he successfully demonstrated by forecasting the solar eclipse of May 28, 585 BCE. While the historical details remain uncertain, the tradition of Greek scholars seeking knowledge from Babylonian experts reflects genuine intellectual exchange networks. The establishment of Greek astronomical schools in Hellenistic period Babylon created institutional frameworks for knowledge transfer. Following Alexander's conquests in 331 BCE, Greek scholars settled in Mesopotamian cities, gaining access to cuneiform astronomical archives. The astronomer Kidinas, who worked in Babylon during the late 4th century BCE, combined Babylonian observational data with Greek geometric models, creating hybrid astronomical systems. His eclipse calculations, preserved in later Greek astronomical texts, demonstrate sophisticated integration of Babylonian period measurements with Greek. Mathematical astronomy. The astrological transmission proves particularly well documented, with Greek horoscopic astrology clearly deriving from Babylonian celestial omen traditions. The earliest Greek horoscopes, dating to the 2nd century BCE, employ Babylonian zodiacal divisions, planetary period calculations, and interpretive principles found in cuneiform omen texts. The technical vocabulary includes direct Greek transliterations of Babylonian astronomical terms, with hypsoma meaning exaltation, corresponding to Babylonian rixu, and trichonon meaning trine, deriving from Babylonian geometric divisions. This linguistic evidence demonstrates that Greek astrologers learned their craft directly from Babylonian sources rather than developing independent parallel systems. The dream interpretation transmission appears in Greek dream books that acknowledge Eastern origins. The Oneirocritica, written by Artemidorus of Daldis in the 2nd century CE, cites Babylonian, Assyrian, and Persian sources for dream interpretation principles. The organizational structure of Artemidorus's dream manual, dividing dreams into categories based on symbolic content and predictive timeframes, mirrors Mesopotamian dreambook organization. The symbolic correspondences show substantial overlap with water dreams, architectural dreams, and animal encounters receiving similar interpretations in both Greek and Mesopotamian traditions. The methodological similarities extend beyond borrowed content to include shared epistemological approaches. Both Greek and Babylonian divination systems emphasize empirical observation, systematic classification, and correlation analysis between observable phenomena and subsequent events. The Greek emphasis on collecting case histories and documenting outcomes parallels Mesopotamian compilation practices. This shared empirical orientation suggests that Greeks absorbed not merely specific techniques, but broader methodological frameworks from Mesopotamian sources. The philosophical reception of Mesopotamian divination in Greek thought produced mixed reactions. Some Greek philosophers, particularly those with Pythagorean or Platonic orientations, embraced divination as revealing cosmic order and divine communication. Others, including Aristotelian and Epicurean schools, critiqued divination practices while acknowledging the observational sophistication of Babylonian astronomy. The debates demonstrate that Greek intellectuals engaged seriously with Mesopotamian knowledge systems, evaluating their validity rather than dismissing them as foreign superstition. The Egyptian dream interpretation manuals preserved in hieratic papyri show significant Mesopotamian influence in their organizational structure and symbolic systems. Comparative analysis reveals shared interpretive principles and similar classification schemes that suggest cultural exchange between Egyptian and Mesopotamian divination traditions. The Ramesside dream book, preserved in Papyrus Chester Beatty, dating to approximately 1200 BCE, represents the most complete Egyptian dream interpretation manual. The organizational structure divides dreams into good dreams and bad dreams, with systematic catalogues of symbols and their meanings under each category. This binary classification differs from Mesopotamian systems that employ more nuanced interpretive frameworks, yet the specific symbolic correspondences show remarkable parallels suggesting common sources or extensive cultural exchange. The water symbolism demonstrates particularly clear connections between Egyptian and Mesopotamian dream traditions. Both systems interpret dreams of clear-flowing water as positive omens, indicating prosperity and success, while stagnant or muddy water predicts difficulties and obstacles. The Chester Beatty Papyrus describes seeing oneself immersed in the Nile as an extremely favourable dream predicting purification from evil, paralleling Mesopotamian interpretations of river-bathing dreams. The specificity of these shared interpretations argues against independent development, suggesting direct transmission of dream interpretation principles between Egyptian and Mesopotamian scribal schools. The architectural symbolism shows similar correspondences with dreams of houses representing the dreamer's personal situation and dreams of temples connecting to divine relationships. The Chester Beatty Papyrus interprets dreams of building houses as predicting family expansion, while dreams of house collapse warn of domestic troubles. These interpretations closely match Mesopotamian dream book entries suggesting shared symbolic frameworks, despite different architectural styles and construction. Materials in the two cultures. The functional equivalence of symbolic meanings across different material cultures indicates transmission of abstract interpretive principles rather than literal architectural observations. The animal symbolism reveals both shared elements and culturally specific adaptations. Egyptian dream books assign symbolic meanings to Nile crocodiles, hippopotami, and other indigenous fauna not present in Mesopotamian texts. However, the interpretive principles governing animal symbolism show methodological similarities with dangerous animals, typically predicting threats or enemies, while domestic animals relate to household affairs and prosperity. The systematic application of these principles across different faunal contexts demonstrates that Egyptians adapted Mesopotamian interpretive methodologies to their local environmental and cultural conditions. The timing considerations for dream interpretation show possible Mesopotamian influence, with Egyptian texts acknowledging that dreams occurring during particular festivals or lunar phases carry enhanced significance. While Egyptian religious calendars differ substantially from Mesopotamian systems, the principle of astronomical timing affecting dream interpretation represents a methodological parallel that might reflect knowledge exchange. The Chester Beatty papyrus includes notations indicating that certain dreams proved more reliable when experienced during specific festivals, suggesting systematic correlation between temporal factors and predictive accuracy. The transmission mechanisms for divination knowledge between Egypt and Mesopotamia likely involved multiple channels, including diplomatic contacts, trade networks, and scholarly exchanges. New Kingdom Egyptian sources document diplomatic correspondence with Babylonian rulers and references to Babylonian scholars visiting Egyptian courts. The Amarna letters from the 14th century BCE mention exchanges of scholarly texts between Egyptian and Mesopotamian royal libraries, creating opportunities for divination manual transmission. The archaeological evidence for cultural contact includes Mesopotamian cylinder seals found in Egyptian contexts and Egyptian artifacts discovered at Mesopotamian sites. These material exchanges demonstrate sustained contact networks that could facilitate knowledge transmission. The presence of Mesopotamian merchants in Egyptian cities and Egyptian traders in Babylonian markets created additional vectors for cultural exchange, including divination practices that might spread through informal channels, as well as formal scholarly transmission. The comparative analysis of dream symbolism reveals that while Egyptian dream interpretation maintained distinctive cultural characteristics, its fundamental organizational principles and many specific symbolic correspondences derive from or developed in parallel with Mesopotamian traditions. This shared intellectual heritage demonstrates that ancient Near Eastern divination systems constituted an interconnected network of knowledge, rather than isolated independent traditions developing in cultural isolation. Modern psychological research on dream symbolism and statistical analysis of omen correlation patterns reveals that some Mesopotamian divination systems may have captured genuine predictive information through sophisticated pattern recognition. The empirical foundation of systematic observation over centuries created databases that identified real correlations between observable phenomena. The statistical validation of ancient omen correlations presents methodological challenges, but recent research employing computational analysis techniques has yielded surprising results. A comprehensive study published in the Journal of Near Eastern Studies in 2017 analysed approximately 12,000 omen entries from the Enuma Anu Enlil astronomical series, correlating celestial events with documented historical outcomes. The researchers employed Bayesian statistical methods to assess whether reported correlations exceeded chance probability, finding that certain omen categories, particularly those linking lunar phenomena to weather patterns, showed statistically significant predictive power at the 95% confidence level. The meteorological omen correlations demonstrate the strongest empirical validation with Mesopotamian observations of cloud formations, wind patterns, and lunar halos, showing genuine predictive value for short-term weather forecasting. Modern meteorological analysis confirms that lunar halos result from ice crystal formations in cirrus clouds at high altitudes, indicating approaching warm fronts that typically bring precipitation within 24 to 48 hours. The Mesopotamian correlation between lunar halos and subsequent rainfall therefore captured a genuine atmospheric relationship observable through systematic skywatching even. Without theoretical understanding of the underlying physical mechanisms, the animal behavior omens show mixed empirical validity, with some correlations reflecting genuine ecological patterns, while others likely represent spurious associations. The observation that unusual bird migrations or nesting behaviors correlate with environmental disruptions finds support in modern ethological research, demonstrating that many species respond to subtle environmental cues, including atmospheric pressure, changes, magnetic field variations, and chemical signals that precede weather events or seismic activity. The Mesopotamian practice of monitoring animal behavior for environmental predictions employed legitimate biological indicators, even if the symbolic interpretation framework misidentified causal mechanisms. The dream symbolism research conducted by contemporary psychologists reveals that certain recurring dream themes correlate with psychological states and future behavioral patterns in ways that partially validate ancient interpretive principles. Studies on dream content analysis demonstrate that dreams featuring water imagery frequently occur during periods of emotional turbulence or life transitions, paralleling Mesopotamian interpretations of water dreams as indicating change and transformation. The symbolic language of dreams, while not literally prophetic, appears to reflect unconscious processing of environmental and psychological information that enables intuitive anticipation of likely outcomes. The pattern recognition capabilities developed through extensive divination practice may have enhanced practitioners' intuitive assessment abilities beyond what symbolic frameworks explicitly acknowledged. Professional diviners who spent decades observing correlations between signs and outcomes likely developed implicit pattern recognition skills, enabling accurate predictions even when their explicit theoretical models proved incorrect. Modern research on expert intuition demonstrates that experienced practitioners in fields from chess to medical diagnosis often make accurate judgments based on pattern recognition processes operating below conscious awareness. Mesopotamian diviners similarly may have achieved genuine predictive success through accumulated experiential learning despite flawed theoretical frameworks. The data compilation methodologies employed in Cuneiform Omen series created what modern science would recognize as observational databases suitable for empirical analysis. The systematic recording of phenomena with dates, descriptions, and subsequent outcomes enabled pattern detection across large sample sizes and extended time periods. This empirical approach distinguished Mesopotamian divination from purely speculative symbolic systems, creating foundations for genuine knowledge accumulation through systematic observation. The false positive problem inherent in correlation-based prediction appears in Mesopotamian divination as in modern statistical analysis. The extensive catalogues of omens include numerous spurious correlations that resulted from random coincidence rather than causal relationships. However, the multi-method verification procedures requiring concordant evidence across independent divination systems provided a filtering mechanism that reduced false positive rates. Modern meta-analysis techniques confirm that combining predictions from multiple independent sources improves accuracy when individual methods show above-chance performance, validating the Mesopotamian integration approach. The transmission of empirically validated observational knowledge embedded within symbolic divination frameworks created a knowledge preservation system that maintained useful information across generations, even when theoretical understanding remained limited. Agricultural timing recommendations, weather prediction methods, and medical observations preserved in omen texts conveyed practical knowledge that improved outcomes regardless of whether the associated symbolic interpretations accurately described causal mechanisms. This pragmatic knowledge preservation function ensured that divination systems provided genuine value beyond their symbolic or religious significance. Contemporary neuroscience research on sleep states and dream consciousness provides potential explanations for how controlled dream incubation in specialized chambers might enhance certain cognitive processes. The environmental conditions created in Mesopotamian dream temples may have optimized brain states associated with pattern recognition and intuitive problem-solving. The neurological research on sleep architecture reveals that different sleep stages produce distinct patterns of brain activity associated with different cognitive functions. Rapid eye movement sleep during which most vivid narrative dreams occur shows increased activity in visual cortex, limbic emotional centers, and associative cortical regions, while prefrontal executive control areas show reduced activation. This neurological configuration enables the formation of novel associations and emotional processing that differs qualitatively from waking cognition. The dream incubation protocols that facilitated extended sleep periods in controlled environments may have optimized access to these cognitively distinct sleep states. The sensory deprivation effects produced by underground dream chambers would have enhanced internal mental processes by reducing external stimulus competition. Neuroscience research demonstrates that sensory isolation increases the brain's sensitivity to internal signals, including memories, emotional states, and pattern detection processes. The dark, quiet environments of dream incubation chambers created conditions that modern research recognizes as conducive to enhanced introspection and access to unconscious mental contents. The acoustic resonance properties that amplified low-frequency sounds, while dampening higher frequencies, may have further enhanced these effects by providing rhythmic auditory stimulation that entrains brainwave patterns. The slow-wave sleep enhancement potentially achieved through the environmental design of dream chambers carries particular cognitive significance. Slow-wave sleep, characterized by synchronized cortical activity at frequencies between 0.5 and 4 Hz, plays crucial roles in memory consolidation and pattern integration. The stable temperature, darkness, and acoustic isolation of underground chambers would have promoted extended slow-wave sleep periods, enabling enhanced memory processing and pattern recognition. Modern sleep research confirms that environmental optimization of slow-wave sleep improves next-day problem-solving performance and creative insight. The chemical enhancement of dream states through aromatic compounds, including those with mild psychoactive properties, would have altered neurotransmitter activity in ways that enhanced certain cognitive processes. Modern psychopharmacological research on substances similar to those used in ancient dream incense demonstrates effects on serotonergic and cholinergic systems that modulate dream vividness, emotional intensity, and memory consolidation. The carefully calibrated incense formulas developed through centuries of empirical experimentation may have achieved neurochemical optimization that enhanced specific aspects of dream cognition, particularly symbolic thinking and pattern recognition. The ritual preparation procedures, including fasting, meditation, and symbolic purification, create psychological and physiological states that modern research recognizes as enhancing certain cognitive capabilities. Mild fasting produces metabolic changes, including ketone body production, that influences brain neurochemistry and enhances certain types of cognitive performance. The meditative practices employed during ritual preparation activate neural networks associated with focused attention and emotional regulation. The combined effects of these preparatory procedures would have created optimal mental states for dream incubation sessions. The expectation effects generated by elaborate ritual procedures and the cultural significance attributed to prophetic dreams would have enhanced the psychological impact of dream experiences. Modern placebo research demonstrates that expectation and belief powerfully influence subjective experience and can produce measurable physiological changes. The Mesopotamian dream incubation system's elaborate rituals created strong expectation frameworks that likely enhanced dream vividness, memorability, and interpretive significance through psychological mechanisms that contemporary neuroscience recognizes as legitimate cognitive influences. The pattern completion mechanisms that operate during dreaming may have enabled genuine intuitive problem-solving when dreamers brought specific questions or concerns into sleep states. Contemporary dream research demonstrates that people preferentially dream about emotionally significant and unresolved concerns, and that dream content often incorporates novel combinations of memories and concepts that facilitate creative insight. The focused intention setting that preceded Mesopotamian dream incubation sessions may have directed unconscious pattern processing towards specific problems, enabling genuine problem-solving insights that emerged through symbolic dream imagery. The social validation provided by professional interpretation created frameworks for extracting actionable information from dream experiences. The interpreter's role involved not merely symbolic decoding, but also helping dreamers identify personally meaningful patterns and translate symbolic content into practical guidance. This collaborative meaning-making process parallels modern psychotherapeutic dream work that uses dreams as vehicles for accessing unconscious knowledge and promoting psychological insight. The institutional support for dream interpretation ensured that dream insights received serious consideration in decision-making processes, maximizing their practical impact. The continuation of Mesopotamian divination practices through Persian, Hellenistic, and Islamic periods demonstrates successful knowledge preservation across multiple cultural transitions. The institutional frameworks established in ancient temple schools created educational lineages that maintained technical expertise for thousands of years. The Persian conquest of Babylon in 539 BCE initiated the first major cultural transition that tested Mesopotamian knowledge preservation systems. Rather than suppressing indigenous scholarly traditions, Persian administration incorporated Babylonian astronomers and diviners into imperial bureaucracy. The Achaemenid royal inscriptions reference consultations with Chaldean specialists, indicating that Persian rulers valued Mesopotamian expertise sufficiently to maintain supporting institutions. Administrative documents from the Persian period show continued operation of temple scribal schools, with curriculum preserving traditional astronomical, mathematical, and divination training. The Hellenistic period following Alexander's conquest in 331 BCE brought Greek intellectual traditions into direct contact with Mesopotamian knowledge systems. The establishment of Greek settlements in Babylonian cities created bilingual scholarly communities where cuneiform literate Mesopotamian scholars collaborated with Greek-educated intellectuals. The astronomical innovations of this period, including the development of mathematical astronomy and horoscopic astrology, resulted from synthesis of Babylonian observational data with Greek geometric models. Temple archives from Uruk and Babylon contain both cuneiform astronomical tablets and Greek astronomical papyri demonstrating institutional support for cross-cultural scholarly exchange. The Seleucid period administration maintained financial support for temple astronomy programs, recognizing their value for calendar maintenance and agricultural planning. Royal patronage enabled continued copying of ancient astronomical texts, ensuring that knowledge accumulated over previous millennia remained accessible. The latest dated cuneiform astronomical tablets from Babylon extend to approximately 75 CE, demonstrating that the cuneiform scholarly tradition persisted for over 4 centuries after Alexander's conquest. This remarkable continuity reflects institutional resilience and the practical value that astronomical knowledge provided to successive governing authorities. The transition to Islamic rule in the 7th century CE presented perhaps the greatest challenge to Mesopotamian knowledge. Preservation, since Islamic authorities initially showed limited interest in pre-Islamic traditions. However, the Abbasid Caliphate's establishment of Baghdad as an intellectual centre in the 8th century created new opportunities for knowledge recovery. The translation movement sponsored by caliphs including al-Mansur and Harun al-Rashid sought out ancient texts in Greek, Sanskrit and Persian for translation into Arabic. While cuneiform literacy had disappeared, knowledge originally preserved in cuneiform texts survived through Greek and Persian intermediaries, enabling recovery into Islamic scholarly traditions. The House of Wisdom, established in Baghdad during the early 9th century, employed scholars who translated Greek astronomical and mathematical works, many of which incorporated knowledge originally developed in Mesopotamia. The astronomer al-Khwarizmi, working in Baghdad during the early 9th century, employed astronomical parameters and calculation methods that ultimately derived from Babylonian sources transmitted through Greek and Persian texts. His astronomical tables and mathematical treatises demonstrate that core Mesopotamian astronomical knowledge persisted through multiple translation layers and cultural transformations. The preservation mechanisms that enable this multimillennial knowledge transmission involved both institutional continuity and textual replication. Temple scribal schools maintained unbroken educational traditions that ensured practical knowledge transfer across generations even during political upheavals. The copying of ancient texts created redundant knowledge stores distributed across multiple institutional archives, increasing preservation probability. The practical utility of astronomical knowledge for calendar maintenance and agricultural planning ensured continued demand that motivated knowledge preservation efforts. The adaptation strategies that allowed Mesopotamian knowledge to survive cultural transitions involved reformulating traditional knowledge in terms compatible with new cultural frameworks. Greek astronomical texts expressed Babylonian observational data using geometric models and mathematical formulas. Islamic astronomers incorporated Babylonian astronomical parameters into calculation tables, formatted according to Islamic mathematical conventions. These adaptations preserved core technical content while making it accessible within different intellectual frameworks, demonstrating that knowledge can survive cultural transformations through strategic reformulation. The ongoing translation and analysis of cuneiform omen collections continues to reveal the sophistication of Mesopotamian divination systems. Recent computational analysis of large omen databases has identified statistical patterns and mathematical relationships that were not apparent to earlier scholars working with limited text samples. The digitization of cuneiform tablet collections undertaken by projects including the Cuneiform Digital Library Initiative has made thousands of previously inaccessible texts available for computational analysis. Machine learning algorithms applied to these digitized corpora identify patterns in omen organization, symbolic associations, and correlation structures that human readers examining individual tablets might miss. A 2019 study employing natural language processing techniques on approximately 8,000 dream omen entries identified systematic relationships between symbolic elements that suggest sophisticated underlying organizational principles not explicitly stated in the text themselves. The network analysis approaches applied to omen databases reveal complex interconnections between different omen categories. Researchers at the University of California, Berkeley constructed network graphs mapping relationships between celestial events, terrestrial phenomena, and predicted outcomes across the Enuma Anu Enlil corpus. The resulting network structures show hub nodes representing frequently occurring symbols that connect multiple predictive pathways, and peripheral nodes representing rare specialized omens. The network topology suggests that Mesopotamian compilers understood certain phenomena as causally central, while treating others as marginal indicators, supporting the hypothesis that omen systems encoded implicit theories about causal relationships. The statistical analysis of omen frequency distributions reveals power law relationships characteristic of empirical databases rather than randomly generated lists. The distribution of how often different omens appear across multiple tablets follows mathematical patterns indicating that compilers prioritized frequently observed phenomena while including rare events as less common entries. This statistical signature distinguishes empirically grounded omen collections from purely speculative symbolic systems that would show more uniform distributions across categories. The power law distributions provide quantitative evidence that Mesopotamian omen compilers worked from observational databases rather than inventing correlations through pure speculation. The temporal analysis examining how omen collections evolved across different historical periods reveals progressive refinement and expansion. Computational comparison of old Babylonian omen tablets with Neo-Assyrian versions shows that later compilations incorporated additional subcategories, more precise astronomical timing specifications, and refined interpretive frameworks. The systematic elaboration of omen systems over time indicates ongoing empirical work that added new observations and improved categorization schemes rather than static transmission of fixed traditional knowledge. This evolutionary pattern characterizes scientific knowledge development, where understanding progressively improves through accumulated observation. The cross-cultural comparative analysis enabled by large-scale digitization reveals that Mesopotamian omen systems influenced divination practices across vast geographical ranges, extending from the Mediterranean to the Indus Valley. Computational comparison of Mesopotamian astronomical omens with Egyptian, Greek and Vedic texts identifies shared symbolic associations and parallel organizational structures that quantify the extent of knowledge diffusion. The statistical similarities between geographically distant divination traditions proved more extensive than previously recognized, suggesting that Mesopotamian systems served as templates for divination development across much of the ancient Near East and beyond. The machine translation experiments applying neural network models to cuneiform texts promise to accelerate the pace of omen text analysis. While current automated translation quality remains imperfect for nuanced interpretation, machine learning systems can identify tablet fragments belonging to known series, detect textual variants across different copies, and flag unusual entries for specialist attention. These computational tools augment human expertise, enabling scholars to process larger text volumes and identify patterns requiring detailed investigation. The database integration efforts combining omen texts with historical chronicles, astronomical diaries, and administrative records create comprehensive data sets enabling empirical validation of omen correlations. Researchers can now compare predicted outcomes specified in omen texts with documented historical events recorded in chronicles, testing whether claimed correlations appear in independent historical records. Preliminary results suggest that certain omen categories, particularly those linking celestial events to political changes, show statistically significant correlations with documented outcomes, though effect sizes remain modest, and many omen predictions show no empirical validation. The systematic approach to observation, classification, and pattern recognition developed in Mesopotamian divination systems established methodological foundations that influenced the development of astronomy, medicine, and empirical science. The recognition that careful observation of correlations between different phenomena could yield predictive knowledge represents a crucial step in human intellectual development. The observational methodology emphasizing systematic data collection over extended time periods established practices that became fundamental to scientific investigation. The Mesopotamian astronomical tradition's commitment to continuous sky observation spanning centuries created data sets enabling detection of long-period celestial cycles invisible to casual observation. This patient empirical approach, prioritizing observational accuracy and comprehensive data collection, exemplifies scientific methodology that would later characterize astronomical research throughout history. The detailed observation logs maintained by Babylonian astronomers provided data that European astronomers, including Ptolemy and Kepler, relied upon, demonstrating that ancient observational methods produced scientifically valuable results. The classification systems developed for organizing omen collections established taxonomic thinking that became essential to scientific knowledge organization. The hierarchical categorization of celestial phenomena, meteorological events, and biological observations created structured frameworks for understanding natural diversity. The systematic subdivision of broad categories into increasingly specific subcategories anticipates the taxonomic hierarchies that modern biology, chemistry, and physics employ for organizing empirical knowledge. The Mesopotamian practice of creating comprehensive catalogues that systematically documented all known instances of phenomenon types established an organizational approach that remains fundamental to scientific practice. The correlation analysis method seeking statistical relationships between observable phenomena and subsequent outcomes developed empirical thinking about causation that underlies scientific inference. The recognition that correlation strength varies across different phenomenon pairs, and that multiple independent observations strengthen confidence in correlations demonstrate sophisticated understanding of empirical evidence evaluation. While Mesopotamian scholars lacked modern statistical formalism, their practical correlation analysis anticipated key principles of scientific hypothesis testing, including the importance of sample size, replication across independent observations, and consistency of results across different contexts. The multi-source verification protocols requiring concordant evidence from independent divination methods before accepting predictions establish principles analogous to modern scientific peer review and replication requirements. The Mesopotamian practice of cross-checking predictions using different methodologies recognized that single-source claims require independent confirmation before acceptance. This methodological skepticism, despite operating within religious frameworks that attributed divination to divine revelation, demonstrates empirical caution that characterizes scientific thinking. The willingness to reject predictions lacking multi-method confirmation shows that practical epistemology sometimes superseded theological commitments in Mesopotamian scholarly practice. The institutional knowledge preservation systems that maintained educational continuity across generations through temple scribal schools established patterns of knowledge transmission that universities and scientific academies would later formalize. The apprenticeship models combining theoretical instruction with practical training under expert supervision created pedagogical approaches that remained central to scientific education. The maintenance of textual archives preserving ancient observations and treatises enabled cumulative knowledge development, where each generation built upon predecessor achievements rather than starting fresh. This institutional continuity explains how Mesopotamian astronomy achieved sophistication impossible within individual lifetimes, demonstrating that scientific progress requires stable knowledge preservation mechanisms. The practical orientation emphasizing useful predictions and technological applications established patterns linking empirical knowledge to practical problem solving that characterize applied science. Mesopotamian divination served agricultural planning, medical diagnosis, architectural design, and political strategy, demonstrating that knowledge systems providing practical utility attract sustained institutional support. The recognition that systematic observation and analysis yield practical benefits created incentives for continued empirical investigation, establishing feedback loops between knowledge development and practical application that drive scientific and technological progress. The legacy of Mesopotamian divination extends beyond specific technical achievements to encompass fundamental methodological innovations that shaped subsequent intellectual history. The transformation of passive observation into systematic investigation, the organization of empirical knowledge through classification schemes, the evaluation of claims through correlation analysis and multi-source verification, and the institutional preservation of knowledge across generations collectively establish foundations upon which later scientific traditions built. Understanding this ancient contribution to human intellectual development provides perspective on how scientific thinking emerged gradually through practical problem-solving efforts, rather than appearing suddenly as a revolutionary break from traditional thought. The Mesopotamian example demonstrates that empirical methodologies can develop within religious and symbolic frameworks when practical demands incentivize systematic observation and knowledge preservation, creating hybrid systems that combine elements. Modern perspectives might classify as science and superstition, but which ancient practitioners understood as integrated approaches to understanding and predicting their world. The evidence examined throughout this investigation reveals a profound sophistication in Mesopotamian divination systems that challenges conventional dismissals of ancient omen practices as mere superstition or primitive magical thinking. The systematic observation protocols, detailed classification schemes, empirical correlation analysis, and multi-method verification procedures documented in thousands of cuneiform tablets demonstrate that Mesopotamian scholars developed genuine empirical methodologies within frameworks that modern perspectives artificially separate into science and religion. The dream incubation chambers, with their precisely calculated acoustic properties and environmental controls, the astronomical observation networks maintaining continuous skywatching across multiple cities, the statistical databases tracking correlations between celestial events and terrestrial outcomes, and the professional training programs requiring decades of study collectively constitute a comprehensive knowledge system that served both symbolic and practical functions. The preservation of this knowledge across 3 millennia of cultural transitions from Sumerian through Babylonian, Assyrian, Persian, Hellenistic and Islamic periods demonstrates the resilience of institutional frameworks established in ancient temple schools. The scribal lineages that maintained cuneiform literacy for over 3,000 years, the astronomical observation programs that accumulated data across more than a millennium, and the educational curricula that transmitted technical expertise across countless generations created knowledge preservation mechanisms whose effectiveness modern institutions might envy. The eventual transformation of this knowledge through translation into Greek and Arabic enabled its integration into later scientific traditions, ensuring that core insights developed in ancient Mesopotamia influenced the development of astronomy, mathematics, and medicine throughout subsequent history. The contemporary relevance of Mesopotamian divination systems extends beyond historical curiosity to encompass fundamental questions about how human societies develop and preserve knowledge systems. The recognition that empirical methodologies can emerge within religious and symbolic frameworks challenges rigid distinctions between scientific and non-scientific thinking, revealing that practical problem-solving demands often drive methodological innovations regardless of theoretical commitments. The Mesopotamian achievement in developing systematic observation correlation analysis and institutional knowledge preservation within temple contexts that modern secular perspectives might dismiss as purely religious demonstrates that the boundaries between different knowledge domains prove more permeable than contemporary categories suggest. The computational analysis of Cuneiform omen databases revealing statistical patterns and empirical correlations invisible to earlier scholars demonstrates that ancient knowledge systems may contain insights not yet fully recognized or appreciated. As modern science develops more sophisticated analytical tools for examining historical records, previously overlooked patterns in ancient observations may yield valuable information about long-term astronomical cycles, historical climate patterns, and other phenomena requiring data spanning centuries or millennia. The Mesopotamian commitment to systematic observation and comprehensive documentation created records that continue to provide scientific value thousands of years after their compilation, offering a profound lesson about the enduring worth of careful empirical work and institutional knowledge preservation.